All right, so thanks for the ones joining already. Hello, welcome. We have a bunch of people still coming in, so we're just going to give 1 minute or so, and we'll be starting with this today's session, the webinar class. And this one is about product mindset and stakeholders management by Bruce McCarthy. I'm going to, hi Bruce. Bruce is already with us, so he's going to stay with us until the end of the session, hopefully. Although Bruce was super nice because he's actually speaking at the conference today, and he found a slot. He managed to get this slot on his very busy agenda today. So thanks, Bruce, for making the connection happen and for staying with us and talking through these topics. So let me just get started with introducing myself for those that don't know, because we have people that have been here since the very first session, actually. That's great. But we always have new people coming to the sessions, which is also really good. My name is Andre Marquet. I'm the founder and CEO of Productized, and this year we have invited some of our, friends, because I think we can put it this way. Bruce has been with us back in 2019, actually. In the room where I am right now, I have the 2019 poster, which I'm going to show you guys. Just in front of me, I do have my poster. You might not
it just
see
looks
it.
like flat
purple. I'll try to take out the, just have some people joining, admitting it all. I'll just take out the blur background and take, okay, so here it is. And you might find you were not in the poster, Bruce. I just realized.
Oh no.
You were not in the main poster. What happened here? I was super convinced that you were one of our poster childs in the 2019 edition. So we had Gibson, Alan, Steve Portugal, Regan Davis, Sarah Doody, Jeff Flash, who, thank God I had to fire all these people during COVID, right? So now I cannot fire them anymore. But for some reason,
was there, right?
But
it wasn't a hallucination.
Yes, no hallucination. You were definitely there. You were. Okay, so Bruce was there, but we have been doing this since 2015. This is actually a picture from the first event, and that was also a really cool one. And that's when that was really when Productized was born. We were born as a community of people interested on product topics. So every year since 2015, these are pictures from 2016, 17, 18, 15. And every year we have been doing this event. And we have invited iconic thought leaders, including our friend Bruce McCarthy back in 2019, but also Teresa Torres, Rich Mironov, our common friend Rich, now living in Portugal, but also Melissa Perry. And we have 10 years in 10 talks. I'm pretty sure you are one of our golden talks. This is a playlist we have created on our YouTube channel. So if you visit our YouTube channel, you'll find 10 years in 10 talks. Check them out. Bruce is definitely one of the talks with the most views, and rightly so. Productizing numbers, we've had over 4,000 IRL participants, which is crazy if you think about it, because most events have like 200, 400 people. So over the years, we've had thousands of people joining our events, over 1,000 hours of product training, over 60 different nationalities from all over the world, including Europe and Americas, and a little bit of all over the place, really. So that means that a part of what I do as a conference organizing is writing letters, the visa application letters to the Portuguese foreign exchange department to make sure that these people can join us here in Lisbon in October. And that's what's going to happen this year. We'll have attendees from leading companies, but also independent companies, people working as contractors, people working as product coaches, product managers, individual contributors this year. It's going to happen October 15th and 16 and 17. So October 15 is our Leaders Day, and then 16 and 17 is the actual conference. The theme of this year is how to create change together, we just thought that there's a lot of going on in the world, and being together, it's also a great excuse to be more aligned. And this is happening at venue at the Field Meeting Center, which is a new venue. It's different from the venue where you were back with 5 years ago with us, Bruce. So I think this is a much better venue than the one we had back then, although the one we had was not that bad, but this one is actually bigger, has a state-of-the-art venue. It allows us to have 12 hands workshops in the first on October 16, and then inspiring talks and panels on October 17. It allows our attendees to network with hundreds of product people. We promise to have great coffee from professional baristas, generous breaks, a cool vibe, and also an after party. So stay for the party and stay for the local craft beer. It's great. It's my favorite. So the tickets are already on sale, and the early bird discounts only until the end of June. So if you are still struggling to convince your boss, you should tell them, 35% discount until the end of the month. And I strongly recommend that you do so, because you can get to save a lot of money by just registering sooner than later. So with no further ado, I would like to pass it on to Bruce, and I will just stop my share and I will just read Bruce McCarthy's bio, which is quite impressive. Bruce is not just a product leader, he's also a product visionary. He's also the founder of Product Culture, where he has been working for the last few years, at least since we started engaging. And he's the co-author of a recent book called The Product Roadmaps Relaunched and Aligned: Stakeholder Management for Product Leaders. And Bruce has dedicated his career to helping organizations navigate uncertainty, align stakeholders, craft winning product strategies. He has extensive leadership experience at Oracle, ATG, Net Prospects, and DB. And also, Bruce was instrumental helping OutSystems designing their product academy, which is an internal academy they have developed for their own product managers, but very generously, OutSystems has also opened a lot of it to the world out there. So Bruce knows what it takes to build products that thrive in complex environments. He has also shaped the way modern product teams think about roadmaps, execution, and long-term vision. So with no further ado, I would like you to pay attention to this webinar, and I'm really excited to see what Bruce has in show for us today. Bruce.
Thanks very much, Andre. It's really great to be here with you and with the group. I want you all to be thinking of your questions as we go, because I don't have so many slides. I think we will have time for some questions at the end. So be thinking of what you want to ask, and I'll get through quickly enough that we should have some time. I'm going to share my screen and walk you through what I'm thinking about. Can you see this slide where it says product mindset and stakeholders? Actually, it says staleholders. Never change the title of your slide at the last minute. I think that there's a huge overlap between this question of what is a product mindset, or what is product culture, or what is being product led. and dealing with stakeholders. Because I know, because I was a product manager for many years, and I know from working with product teams all over the world that it often doesn't feel like you're on the same team with the marketing folks and the sales folks and the customer support folks and the finance folks. It feels like they have a different mindset or a different culture, different expectations about how things work and how product in particular should work. And so I think that there is a lot to be done and a lot of space to talk about the best ways to bridge that gap between maybe the product team, if you count the engineers and the designers and maybe the data scientists as part of the product team by proxy, and the rest of the organization. And that's where stakeholder management, not stakeholder management, comes in. Um, So first, let's define our terms. We write about the purpose of product teams and of a product mindset in this book, Aligned on Stakeholder Management. And one of the things I think it's important to understand is that great product practice and the product mindset as a whole is about teamwork. It's about doing something together. It's about being on a journey together to create something amazing, to drive value for the customer, for the company, to do something that's never been done before. And product management plays a unique leadership role in that achievement and in leading that team. So, I mean, just realistically, can you do a successful product, make your product successful without sales, without marketing, without customer support, without finance? You really can't. It's not just you and the engineers and the designers making something great and the rest takes care of itself. It's really a holistic, whole company team effort. So with that in mind, um, I want to just quote the great Michael Jordan, basketball player from the last century. He talks about talent being important, but teamwork, he says, along with intelligence, is what really wins in the long run. It's what wins the season, what gets you to the postseason, and what wins the championship. It's not just about having the dream team of great athletes or engineers or designers or product managers. It's about the combination of those. Now, you're probably thinking to yourself, well, yeah, but my stakeholders, man, you should meet those people. They're hard to communicate with. They seem to speak another language. They're disagreeable and opinionated. How are we supposed to get a team together that is all thinking the same, acting the same, speaking the same? And I think part of the challenge is language. I'm going to go into a bunch of challenges and offer some techniques for handling these gaps and this sort of cat herding exercise of managing stakeholders. But I want to start with language. The common language of product, I think, is value. Maybe it's value to the user. The UX people care a lot about that. Maybe it's value to the buyer. As a product manager in B2B, you know that's a different person than the user very often, and you need to take that into account. And sales is constantly thinking about that, um, as is marketing. They're thinking about customer acquisition. And sales or account management is maybe thinking about the user as well, because they're thinking about retention, and happy customers, satisfied customers are usually retained customers. And then there's value to the company. And of course, the CEO is thinking about that, and the finance person is thinking about that. And the whole organization should be thinking about, how do we design a formula to satisfy the user, the buyer, and make money at the same time over the long term. That's that's really the job you got hired for as a product manager, is to speak that common language across the organization and translate where necessary into finance speak or customer support speak or engineering speak. Sometimes though, even though like I said, we're going to talk a lot about goals and that primary goal being value. Uh, the language barrier is much simpler than that. It's just human language. It's just respectful language. It's language that can either bring people together or push them apart, can emphasize commonality or can emphasize division. I'm thinking about the core product manager question. What is the core product manager? The question we're always supposed to be asking, the question we're supposed to ask 5 times if necessary. It's why, right?
Why?
That's our favorite question as product managers is tell me why. And what I want to suggest is that you can ask that question in many different ways with different tones of voice, different body language, and different words. So you can be really judgmental and really distancing about the way you say why. When someone says, "Oh, we should do this feature," you can say, "Why on earth would we do that?" Or you can say, "Oh, that's interesting. I wouldn't have thought of that. Tell me more. Can you help me understand how you think that will help us?" If you step away from judgmental language and tone and body language and step into curiosity and use different, more welcoming, more accepting words, it makes a difference. It's much easier to bridge that gap between us and them, between my department and your department, if if you show this kind of humanity. And I find that if you show humanity to others, curiosity, acceptance, even if you don't agree, they will do the same to you. And so when you fall back into talking product speak, they might be a little bit more forgiving about that too. Now, speaking of talking to other people, one of the things I find is that it's pretty easy to have a conversation with somebody in a completely different function who maybe normally you don't align with and who has different goals. If you just ask them questions, people like to talk about themselves and they like to tell you what's going on with them. And if you give them the opportunity, it builds the relationship and tends to close the gap between you and them. I recommend that you do with your key stakeholders around the organization something that my co-author Melissa and I call in the book a stakeholder interview. And probably if you're reading these questions, probably you're thinking, hey, these look familiar. They look kind of like customer interview questions. And that's very deliberate. The whole idea is not to go to them and tell them, okay, this is what we're doing. It's awesome. Here's all the reasons it's great. And you should support my initiative, my product, my feature, my launch, whatever it is. That's just like going to a customer and saying, I'm going to show you my awesome product. It's terrific, isn't it? That's not the way you're going to get good insight about whether the product meets the customer's needs. So why would that work with a stakeholder? If you think of your stakeholders as a sort of a special kind of customer, then you can do essentially a customer interview with them. And you can say, hey, tell me about your role. What does success look like for you? Well, how are you measured? What's your boss asking you to do and pressuring you to do? And what's hard right now? Where are you struggling? What are your problems to solve or jobs to be done? And what are you trying to do about those things? Where is it working and not working? What's on fire right now? And get them talking. People will be like, oh, let me tell you. Um, and you'll get a long list of complaints. They're not probably complaints about you or your team or your product. They're just in general because you've opened the door very wide with a very open set of questions like this. But if you take the time to listen, two great things happen. One, you learn a lot more about where their motivations are coming from. And so when you need to make your case for them to align with your plan, you have much more to go on. You know how they think, you know what's important to them, you know what words they use, and you can connect your thing to their thing. instead of just trying to shove it down their throats. The second thing is you gain their respect and confidence by listening to them and validating what they've been saying. You've earned the right now to turn it around and be the one who is telling them about your world and asking for their help. And they're going to be much more patient. And they're even probably going to go along with things that they might not have gone along with because you gave them respect and they're going to do the same for you. I think also it's not just about talk. It is also about follow through and being dependable, showing dependability to your stakeholders. I think this is a core part of the teamwork product mindset. And I think taking ownership is the primary measure of dependability for anybody in a business organization. There's a few levels of it we describe in the book. The first level is, of course, you should do your job. You should have the skills necessary and you should be consistent and you should execute and meet expectations. But the second level, and this is super important for product people, is to involve stakeholders and get their feedback and input into your requirements, your priorities, your strategy, your roadmap, everything that you're doing, because you're going to need their buy-in. And the more you involve them early, the more likely that is because they felt like they were involved from the beginning. You got to be proactive, not just accept feedback from stakeholders, but seek it out. Go and say, hey, I'm working on this and I need your input. You've got to listen to them when they say, oh, I don't know, I'm worried about this. That sounds risky. And you've got to take responsibility for dealing with those risks, for acknowledging them as real and saying, okay, here's the plan. Here's what we're going to do about it. Does that sound like it would work to you? Or do you have any other ideas how we could mitigate this? And make them an ally in dealing with those risks instead of just a naysayer. And then there's taking responsibility for results. I never want to hear a product manager say, well, I did my job. I did my job. The other people let us down. If you're really leading the team, you're responsible for the results of the project, the product, the feature, the launch, the revision, the replatforming, whatever. And if it fails in some way, if things don't go as well as you had hoped, stepping up and saying things didn't go as well as we had hoped, here's our analysis of what went wrong. Here's what we plan to do in the future, what we have learned from that. Then you will be seen as someone responsible, as a leader, as someone who can be trusted to tell the truth and to own up to things and to take charge of other things in the future, even if the thing we're talking about here didn't completely succeed. I also want to, I can't help, Andre, I can't help but talk about roadmaps. It's my favorite topic. Um, I want to talk about how you make your roadmap more defensible and more bulletproof. Because one of the things that I hear from product teams all the time is, well, we put together the roadmap, but then we get a feature request from sales, and then we get something from the CEO when they were on a plane or went to a conference, and then marketing wants us to do some competitive catch-up kind of stuff, and then another request from sales to help them close a deal. And how are we supposed to keep the roadmap steady long enough for anybody to actually make any progress on the team if we're just dealing with all of this constant churn? Well, a key defense mechanism against that kind of churn is to bring all of your stakeholders along on the journey of creating the roadmap and updating it with you. And if you align, I'll come back to that slide. If you align with them from the beginning on what the criteria are for something to get on the roadmap, and you work together to put those things on the roadmap and put numbers next to those things, then you won't be the only one defending the roadmap. The rest of the team will say, hang on, we don't want to distract. Yeah, that sounds like a good idea, but we don't want to distract from the existing roadmap because it's so valuable, because they were there and they were part of it. Now, that said, I'll bet that lots of times you have run a meeting with people from other teams where everybody agrees at the end of the day and then nothing happens. You send out the notes and you just never hear anything from anybody again. They all said, yes, we agree to the plan, but then they just don't do their part. What happened there? That happens all the time to product people. I kind of suspect people sometimes just say yes just to end the meeting. So because they have other work to do, right? So how do you prevent what I call either shallow alignment or even worse, fake alignment, where people say, "Yep, yep, I'm totally bought in. Boy, I'm hungry. I need something to eat." Um, how do you prevent that? And my favorite method is something we describe in the book. I stole this term from Patrick Lencioni, who wrote Five Dysfunctions of a Team, mining for conflict. And that is to try to actively bring out people's hidden doubts or concerns or inability even to go along with the plan. And there are a bunch of ideas we describe in the book. Um, one of them, one of my favorites, is called a challenge round, where you actually require everybody who has just said that they agree with the plan to say one thing that they think could possibly go wrong, no matter how crazy it sounds, with the plan. And then frequently, what you find is that people will say things like, well, I wasn't going to say anything, but actually, I am a little worried about this possibility. And now you have a risk that you can deal with and talk about and make a plan to prevent from causing trouble. And at the end of the conversation, that person is way more bought in to actually executing on this plan because you listened to them and validated their concern. And now they have no reason to worry. There's a quick thing also, it's called Fist of Five. Does anybody know what Fist of Five is? No? This is where at the end of a decision discussion, you ask everybody to hold up some number of fingers, anywhere between a fist, 0 fingers, and 5 fingers. Um, and the number that they choose is their confidence in the decision or the plan or whatever it is that it will be successful. And you count to three and you ask everybody to hold up their fingers at the same time so that they're not influencing each other. And then you discover who's fully aligned, all the fives and maybe the fours as well, and who's not. The two ones and the twos are the ones you really need to talk to. Okay, well, if you've got a two, what are you worried about? What is your concern? And now they kind of can't squirm out of saying what they're worried about because they put the two up. Um, and that's another sort of quick ritual way of getting to uncover misalignment, shallow alignment, or fake alignment. I think I covered this already. This is this idea that if you really get good, solid alignment with your stakeholders, then you're not alone when someone comes with their half-baked idea and they want to stuff it into the roadmap or just slip one more thing into the release. Because other people will be saying, no, there's too many valuable things at risk here if we mess with the schedule. So there are a few techniques that you can use for speaking to others about the risks of an emergency diversion from the roadmap. One of them is called cost of delay. Has anybody worked with this before? Um, it's a way of quantifying the value that you expect from something you're doing on the roadmap in dollars, and then um, dollars per month, ideally. And then if someone is trying to insert something into the roadmap, you can say, well, every month that it delays this other thing we were working on is this many thousands or millions of dollars. Is this new thing you want to inject? Is it really worth the cost of delay? There's also something called opportunity cost, which is the core concept that says basically, if we choose to do this, that means we are incurring the cost of the opportunities of all the other things we're not doing. And so if we divert, again, we have a huge cost of opportunities not pursued. And then there's risks. If we try to cram something in late, could it be that we will be late and there are others depending on us? Those are dependencies, or that we could hit bugs or non-compliance. So you can speak to um, your chief compliance officer or your finance person about risks. You can talk to sales about opportunity costs. You can talk to finance and the CEO about cost of delay. And you can talk to all your other teams about dependencies. These are the terms of art that you can make good use of. Now, I want to talk about one subject that maybe is a little bit political. For the most part, a product mindset is we're all on the same mission together and we're all just doing our best to achieve that mission. But sometimes it's not that simple. And when you're thinking about getting the right people together onto your list of stakeholders that you need to manage, um, the most obvious place most people will go is the org chart. I have my boss and their boss and on up to the CEO. And if I need help from marketing, then I can go to the head of marketing. Or maybe I have a marketing counterpart that I work with. And you can usually either through a team chart or an org chart find your way around. But that doesn't necessarily cover everything. What I have found is that there are what we call in the book power players that you also need to deal with. And there are kind of two flavors of power players. These are people who could have a very positive or very negative effect on your product or your project or other initiative if you don't align with them, if you don't have their confidence, and if they don't feel that what you're doing is important. um, a word in the wrong person's ear, and all of your months of planning and budgeting and business case could be out the door because your resources get diverted onto something else. So I'll talk about the two types. First, you have to recognize that each organization has its own culture, and there's usually one or a couple of departments or functions that are more powerful than the others. Big IT software companies are often very engineering driven. Um, Big enterprise software companies are often very sales driven. B2C companies are much more marketing driven frequently. Companies that have been acquired by PE firms are often very finance driven. It's all about the numbers. Um, and so if you know which your company is, if you know that you exist in a sales-driven company, then you know who you have to influence. Even if there's no relationship between you on the org chart or on the team chart, you know that buy-in from sales makes a lot of difference. I worked for a medium-sized software company with hundreds of engineers. It was actually the engineers were about half the company, and I'd worked with the engineers all day long. And I thought, well, it was a very technical product sold to IT people. I thought, well, it's obviously engineering driven, right? Well, it also turned out that the CEO had coffee every morning with the head of sales operations, who knew the state of play of every sales deal in the pipeline. It also turned out that the sales team had an annual kickoff with an awards dinner, which lots of teams do, but they gave awards not just to salespeople, but to other people from other teams, including product managers, for help. No other department had that kind of behavior. Also, if we had a hiring freeze, somehow magically salespeople could be hired anyway, but not engineers. And the kicker that finally clued me in was I didn't get promoted until I started going on more sales calls and helping out close deals. And then the promotion was easy. So I learned this company, despite my expectations, despite looking at it on paper, was really sales driven. The other type of power player I think is worth mentioning is something I call the CEO whisperer. Have you got anybody on your org chart that has a vague title like strategy or partnerships or business development or corp dev, and they've been around for a long time and they have coffee with the CEO really often? Nobody reports to them, but you're not really sure what they do, and nobody else knows either. They tend to join meetings without being invited just to observe. That's what we call the CEO whisperer. Every CEO seems to have at least one person like this, that nobody really knows what they do, and yet their opinion really matters. And I caution you not to ignore this person. Find out what they care about and connect what you're doing to that. And that's a way to de-risk the resources and the support that you need around the organization. Again, that's not very product culture or mindset, but we play in real companies. And so we have to keep these things in mind and not be blindsided by them. Now, it might be hard possibly to keep track of all of this. We have something in the book called the Stakeholder Canvas, which is designed to help you list out your stakeholders, what you know about them, what they need from you, what you need from them. Um, it's really, in the end, it's a spreadsheet, but we've kind of been thoughtful about what information you capture. And at the end of this talk, I will give you a way to download the Stakeholder Canvas for free, along with some other tools from the book. The other thing I think it's important to understand is that other people in other teams who may not always share your mindset are not being difficult on purpose, at least not most of them. There is almost always, when someone is being difficult or disagreeing for reasons that don't seem to make any sense, or advocating for something that's inconsistent with the publicly known strategy, there's always something going on that you don't know, or nearly always. And I always want, when you start to get that feeling like what they're saying just does not compute, not to just argue with them, because obviously, if they agreed with you, they wouldn't be disagreeing. Um, so first, I would ask you to take a pause and try to identify the problem. Why are we not getting along? Why are we arguing and disagreeing? Maybe it's me. You need to check yourself. Maybe you didn't sleep well last night. You've been arguing with your spouse. Your kids are sick, and this is stressful for you. And maybe you're reacting this way to everybody today, and you need to take a break or take the rest of the day off and come back to it with fresh eyes. Or maybe the other person is dealing with some stressors like their spouse or their kids or whatever, or they're under some kind of pressure from their boss that you're not aware of. I had a boss once who insisted that I deliver two PRDs at the same time. And I was like, well, I'll do a better job if I do them one at a time. And he's like, nope, I need them both by the end of the month. And I'm like, well, are we going to start work on them right away? No, I just need them. I couldn't make any sense out of it. But it turned out that his boss had set some sort of a goal that of having a certain number of PRDs completed by the end of that quarter, and that my boss's bonus depended on that. Now, he didn't tell me that. I wish he had. I would have just helped him out. But there was something I didn't know, the kind of pressure he was under. And sometimes, your boss really should tell you, but sometimes they can't. Sometimes there's like an acquisition going on, or a merger, or or they're raising money, or there's something else going on, or it's super personal and they don't want to talk about it. So have a little bit of sympathy and recognize that you don't have the whole picture. Sometimes you can ask, and sometimes you'll find out, and sometimes you won't. The other thing I want to talk about is, if you don't mind the word, assholes. Um, Sometimes people really just are difficult. Some people really just sort of enjoy being difficult, and they view it as kind of a game, and they view um, the winner as the person who rises to the top of the organization by pushing everybody else down. And those people are really toxic and difficult to deal with. And that's the opposite in my mind of a good product mindset. But I think that there's really two types of people who can be difficult, and I think you'll recognize them. Tony Fadell, the father of the iPod and the iPhone at Apple, he was the product manager for the early versions of both of those, and the founder of the Nest thermostat company. He wrote a book, which I highly recommend, called Build. In it, he has a chapter where he describes all the different classifications he's come up with for different kinds of assholes. And it's great. You should read it. Um, but he kind of has two broad categories. One is what he calls what the kind of person that I talked about that's just difficult on purpose is what he calls assholes, just people who are just assholes on purpose. Um, but he has this other term he calls mission driven assholes. And those are people who can be very passionate and very difficult and very stubborn and can sometimes forget to treat you as a human being and just call you names and yell at you. Um, but eventually you figure out that it's just because they're so passionate about the mission, about delivering value to the customer, to the buyer, to the user, and to the company, to making a successful product that makes a dent in the world. And it's not about them or their power or their position. In fact, the only reason they want any sort of title or position is so they can get the mission accomplished. The only reason that they're giving you a hard time is they're worried about the mission not getting accomplished. It's much easier when you figure out what their motivations are by listening to where they're focused and why they do things and whether they take pleasure in giving you a hard time or not. It's much easier to forgive those people for their passion and maybe kind of translate in your mind their tone of voice and their words into something constructive. Then, once you're dealing with difficult situations, you've got to decide for yourself what your next move is. We talk about setting relationship goals like limiting time with assholes. We talk about taking care of yourself, taking enough vacation, giving yourself a break during the day to detox, all sorts of techniques. And I want to talk about one other thing on this slide that should not be a dirty word, which is escalation. Escalation is when you and somebody else disagree and you can't come to agreement and alignment no matter what. That's the time for escalation. And in this case, escalation is not I'm telling on you or complaining about the other person. Escalation is you and this other person together deliberately going to whoever your common boss is in the hierarchy, whoever has the ultimate authority to decide, and say, we are not aligned because our goals are not aligned. We need to know, is my goal or is this other person's goal more important right now in this situation? Because we can't come to agreement. And that doesn't have to be an argument. That can be that's in fact that can be um, very satisfying to resolve because now you and the other person are not fighting. We have a decision and we're moving on. So that's really all I have today. A product mindset is a team mindset is the reminder that I wanted to leave you with. And if you think of your whole extended team around the organization of everybody whose help you need to make your product successful, those are your stakeholders. Stakeholders are not, oh, I need a rubber stamp from legal. Yeah, you do need that, but stakeholders are team members, and that's how I want you to think about it. I promised that I would get you some tools, including the stakeholder canvas. If you follow this QR code, put in your email address and answer a couple of quick questions, you'll be able to download a version of these slides with the 7 tips and also the bonus content from the book, including the stakeholder canvas and a few other things that may be useful to you. It's all free. And that's it for my slides. Do we have time for questions? I think we have a few minutes.
Yes, we do. Absolutely. We do have some time for questions. Thank you so much for this wonderful presentation, Bruce. Also worth to saying that Bruce is going to do a workshop on some of these topics at Productized. So I'm pretty sure we might see those canvas at the conference this year.
Yes.
And we get the chance to fill them in paper. So for everyone else, we are now open for questions. I'm pretty sure everyone has hassles and mission-driven hassles and everything in between. So Bruno, not sure about the hassles here.
Yeah, thanks, Andre. Hey, Bruce, thanks so much for your time. Your points around being human really resonated with me.
Mm,
A big part of our job is building relationships, and the framework you laid out for asking basic questions was really nice and a good way to like form a bond and connection.
mm,
I want to just touch a little bit around the roadmap. So I always feel like I'm protecting my roadmap, keeping the things that I committed to and, trying to execute on all the deliverables. You talked about defining criteria on how those new things get on the roadmap or new items. So I was thinking, what are some good strategies there? I've implemented intake processes before, and it
yeah,
doesn't seem to stick that well.
yeah,
Um, these people are high level managers, come in, say, I want this. They have a lot of power and in a way like presence in the org. So
yeah,
it's always hard to say no, but it always hard to give them like a meaty justification.
yeah. So you're describing hippos, right? Highest paid person in the room.
Yes, definitely.
Or power players, like I said, right? They have influence, and so they say, "I want this, and you better do it." And it's kind of like,
Right.
well, but our process, my spreadsheet, and they're like, "I don't care about any of that.
Don't care.
Just do,
Yep.
just do it." Right? Um, I think there's a couple of things that I would recommend. One is you want to get as close as you can to those people who have a tendency to disrupt your
Mhm.
priorities and your roadmap and understand, develop a relationship with them using some of the techniques that I described and understand what their motivations are and be able to anticipate the kinds of things that they're going to come to you with and even agree with them on like what makes a good candidate for the roadmap, like listen to them and their opinion, and then if and then ask them good product manager qualifying questions to get them to clarify their thinking and boil it down to something you can work with. And then if you're like a lowly IC and they're 15 levels above you, you maybe don't have a lot of room to question them or challenge them on this. But in an ideal scenario where it's not quite such an uneven playing field, you can say, well, let me tell you my perspective on this. It's difficult to manage to that kind of metric or that kind of priority because. And how about something else that's a compromise? The the second thing I would say is it's important to have clear criteria, not just people voting or people shouting on Slack or the latest sales deal that is hugely at risk unless we change the roadmap, but to actually have consistent criteria that were the reason that the things got on the roadmap in the first place and the reason why if we did accept something new on the roadmap that pushed out other things, it makes sense because they actually help us with our goals more
Mm.
than the existing things. So the difficulty here is that we're not always talking apples and apples. Sometimes we're talking apples and oranges. Sales is like, I have a deal that will close this month. It is money. And you're like, well, yes, but we're optimizing for utilization. And they're like, I don't care. I still have to.
Mhm.
Well, the only way to break that tie is if you can find the lowest common denominator between your numbers and their numbers, and it's still money. Rich Marinoff is going to talk about this, I'm sure, at Productized in the fall because this is his favorite topic. We all have to become comfortable with quantifying value somehow or other in dollars. Even if we start with um, engagement or um, usage or something, we have to complete the formula and say we believe that every additional day per month of usage translates into this many more renewals, which translates into this many more
Mm.
dollars.
Mm.
And then you can compare your dollars to the salesperson's dollars. And frankly, the salesperson's dollars may not stack up if you do that right. If you say, look, we just have to improve utilization by 1%, and that's $50 million for us. How big is your deal again? 700,000? Get out of my office.
Right. Yes, it's tying real clear value to every piece of or every item on the roadmap. If it's a dollar-driven organization, if it's optimization, if it's active users,
Yeah. Find
that's a
the
good strategy.
common denominator, right? And then tie things to that. And then you may not make the sales leader happy, but when the head of product and the head of sales together go to the CEO for a tiebreaker, you want to have done the math and know who's going to win.
Right. Awesome. Thank you.
Th-
That was great.
You bet.
Appreciate it.
And
My
thanks,
pleasure.
Bruno, for the question. Just by the way, Bruno is actually traveling all the way from the US to come to Productize this year. So if it's doing 5,000 miles, you have no excuse.
Me too. Where are you based, Bruno?
New York, New Jersey.
Okay, I'm in Boston, and we will no doubt be getting to the Jersey Shore this summer because
Oh,
my
yes.
in-laws live there.
Cape May, Atlantic City, Seaside.
Yep,
Know it all.
great.
All
Hope to
right.
see you
I
there.
think we have time for one or two questions. If anyone else wants to jump in. If you don't have questions, I don't believe that means that everyone works in fantasy land. There's no problems, no hippos, no assholes. All right, Susanna.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Bruce, for that wonderful presentation. Great insights. My question is regarding the stakeholder canvas. Is that something that is for internal use only? Is something that is shared among the other stakeholders as well? How would that work, actually?
I think it's best if you keep it to yourself. It's basically your notes about the other stakeholders. And if you're going to put down that someone is an asshole, regardless of the variety, you probably don't want them to see it.
Of course, of course.
That is the idea. Now, you might possibly share it with some of your colleagues who have some of the same stakeholders, some of your fellow product people. Just share your notes with them, put it on a share drive or something for the team. Maybe you all have a single one, but the intention was that it's yours. Now, the other thing that I use it for, though, is that I'm going to a meeting with one of those stakeholders and I'm bringing it with me to remind me of the last conversation that we had and how that person thinks. We talk a lot about sort of different ways that different people make decisions and what role they play in the decision that you're trying to make, whether they are really the approver or just someone who you're consulting. There's a lot to go there, but there's a lot to go into it. But my point is, I would, even if you bring it to the meeting, I would not show it to the other person.
Okay, thank you.
Bet.
All right, one last question. Anyone? Joel?
Wow, I bet you
I
have a
would
question.
like to. I would like
Oh
to
no,
make
I
a
heard somebody
question,
else.
if it's
No, go
possible.
ahead. Yep.
Sure. Can you just maybe show yourself so we can see you? If you can,
Sure.
of course. Hi, Nilza. Go on.
Hello, everyone. I have a question. It's like dealing with stakeholders, it's kind of a challenge, but imagine that if your relationship with some stakeholder, it's not the best, but I'm really interested about to know what the person values. So I'm going to just give an example. One day I invited the person to have a meeting. She was not busy. She was super busy. She couldn't meet with me because I wanted to talk about some kind of some subjects and some teams that we had to keep up. And I even tried to, in a more chill time, imagine for a cigarette, let's go for a cigarette, I want to talk about some stuff with you.
Yeah, good move.
And she was not open to that, he whatever. So have you ever someone had this kind of relationship with someone? And how do you deal with that? Because you want to know what the person values, and how to have a better work team. So I would like to have some opinion from you guys.
Thank you for the question, Nusa. It's super common what you described, that you need to get close to a particular stakeholder and they just don't seem to want to make time for you. And most often the reason is just that they're super busy. Sometimes they're avoiding you because they don't want to tell you bad news, or I don't know, they don't like you or something. But but most of the time it's just that they're super busy. So there are a few things that you can do, I think, to get around that problem. You tried one of them. We call it in the book something called an unmeeting, which is a meeting that is short, casual, not on the calendar, just you and them. And um, it's like you said, you go for a cigarette, you go for a cup of coffee, you meet at the coffee machine, you have breakfast together or some other meal, or you go out for a drink after work. Um, the more informal, actually, the better. You get more, I think, better information in a informal one-on-one than you do, even if it's only 5 minutes, than you do in a meeting with an agenda and lots of other people. And it's a lot easier to get on someone's schedule when they are super highly scheduled. But if they say no to that, if you say, "Can we have a cup of coffee or a cigarette or whatever," and they just say no, um, there are ways I think you can sort of what I call guerrilla tactics. You can sort of make it happen anyway. Um, my favorite, if you're in the same office, was always to um, camp out with my laptop near the coffee machine because everybody wants coffee or tea or something eventually. And so just wait for them to show up and you'd be like, "Oh, I'm glad I caught you. Do you have 2 seconds?" And it's hard for them to say, "No, I don't have 2 seconds." Now, of course, they know it's not going to be 2 seconds, but usually if you just start in, I'm working on this thing and I really need your input. That's the other thing is the language of "I need your help" is really hard to turn away. It's also flattering for the other person. Um, So do what you can for guerrilla tactics like that. The other one I will say is that a lot of people are open to texting on Slack or Teams or WhatsApp or iMessage or whatever. If you can just shoot them a quick message and say, "I just have this one question." And don't try to cram all your questions into one question because you're afraid that you won't have another chance. Give them one that's really easy to answer. That's like a yes or a no or a multiple choice. Um, so that you get an answer right away because it's faster and easier for them to answer you than to give you an excuse of why they can't answer you. Um, and now you have a conversation going and you can ask them the next question and the next question, and you can ramp up the complexity of the questions. So those are just a few tips. There are more in the book. I hope you'll check it out.
Thank
Thanks,
you a
Basil,
lot.
for the question. We have a very last question from
Yeah.
another person, Gabriela, if you are still with us. All right, maybe not. So let's hand it over to João.
Hi, thank you very much for the presentation and for the tactics that you've shared with us. I was wondering, is it valid or is it possible sometimes to just concede to wrap up the product and say, okay, let's call it the quits for now and we'll reboot it and just try to invite the persons that opposed it the most to start fresh? Is this a possible alternative? Of course, we lose some control over the product, but maybe the company will gain in the overall, in the end, just by inviting
You're
the
saying,
voters.
well, let me see if I understood what you were saying. What I think you might have been saying is to have a session with the people who are not supportive of the product or the project or whatever it is. Is that right?
Sometimes it's more like a political thing in the company. Sometimes people need to have a win, just saying, okay, I killed this product. And
Yeah.
maybe it's better just to agree with them. Okay, let's kill this one and just start a new one and call it something else that does
But it's the same thing.
not the same, but very similar. Just invite the
Very
people that
similar.
opposed you to the start. Because
Well,
sometimes
that I think is a smart technique, right? So I always want, before I'm starting anything, or before I'm getting a team together for a decision, to think who is likely to have a spicy opinion about this and be difficult. And rather than just get into the meeting and deal with that, I want to go to them one-on-one before the project kicks off, before the decision is made,
Para
before I
gostei
get
disso, olha,
a group
desculpa, acho que eu
together.
entrei sem querer. A janela abriu.
And
Eu não olhei, perdão, estava ouvindo uma aula.
Gabriela is yeah, off mic. Before getting the group together, because those people can be very disruptive in the group, right? So rebooting the under a different name, that's a smart way to go. But regardless of whether this is new or rebooted, that talking one-on-one to to your enemies, if you will, to the opposition, not in a small group, but instead just one-on-one, is very powerful. And if you do a good job of listening and finding out what their objections are, you might find out that they have a point and that you really do need to deal with these objections, or your idea is actually dead.
Okay, yes. Thank you. Thank you.
Yep, you bet. I'm really glad to be with you today, and thank you for the great questions. Obviously, this is stuff you guys deal with every day.
Thank you so much, Bruce, for being with us as well, and looking forward to meeting you again, hopefully here in Lisbon in the fall.
Yeah, I'll see you then, and I hope to see all of you there.
Hopefully so. Have a
Thanks,
great one.
Bruce.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.